You know how sometimes an idea just sticks in your brain? Like you hear it and it just lodges right in there and you can't forget it?
Those annoying jingles.
Exactly. But other times, you hear something and it's gone from your memory like 5 minutes later.
Right, and it can be so frustrating. Like, why do some ideas stick while others vanish?
That's what we're going to try to get to the bottom of today. We were first inspired by the book Made to Stick, but we're not going to be referencing it directly. We're going off on our own deep dive here. So, ready to unlock the secrets of sticky ideas and how we can use them to make our own messages unforgettable.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so let's think about something we all know. Urban legends. They can be totally outlandish and unbelievable, but we remember them. Why do we remember the crazy kidney heist story, even though we know it's probably not true? What's that all about?
Well, that's the power of the unexpected.
Right.
When we encounter something that just totally throws us off, it grabs our attention.
Like our brains are like, whoa, hold up, what's going on here?
Exactly. It's evolutionary. Our ancestors had to pay attention to unusual things for survival.
Like saber-toothed tigers hiding in the bushes. But okay, so if surprise was all it took, every weird thing we heard would stick. And that's definitely not the case.
You're right, there's more to it. Surprise is just the hook. But to really make an idea stick, you need interest, curiosity.
Ooh, like a good mystery novel. You get
Mhm.
those little hints and clues, and it makes you want to know more.
Precisely. It's like a treasure map with blanks that you're dying to fill in.
Oh, I totally get that. So it's about creating that need to know more, to solve the puzzle. Okay, so we've piqued their interest, but how do we make sure the message itself sticks? How do we avoid being that easily forgotten news headline?
That's where being concrete comes in. Abstract ideas are, well, abstract, right? Hard to grasp. Give people something concrete, something they can imagine, and it's going to stick with them.
Like a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Exactly. Think about Aesop's fables. We remember those stories because they paint a vivid picture. The fox and the grapes, the tortoise and the hare. We can see those images in our minds.
Oh, you're so right. The images stick with you, even if you don't remember all the details of the story. And it's not just ancient storytelling, it's relevant today, too.
You got it. Think about the Nature Conservancy. They used to talk a lot about biodiversity, which is important, but let's be honest, kind of abstract. So they shifted gears and started focusing on showcasing iconic landscapes, those majestic redwood forests, the vibrant coral reefs. Suddenly, people could picture what was at stake.
It's like they gave those places a personality, made them stars. So people were like, oh, I know those redwoods. I've seen pictures. I want to save them.
Right. They made it tangible, and that's especially important when you're talking to someone who's new to an idea.
Like imagine trying to teach someone to bake just by using words like proofing and kneading without actually showing them what it looks like. It'd be a disaster.
A total mess. They need that visual. Speaking of visuals, have you heard the story about that business school professor pitching his tech startup idea?
No, tell me.
Well, he knew he had to make his company's potential, real for the investors. So he brought a prop, a plain maroon portfolio.
A portfolio. Wait, how does that relate to a tech startup?
That's the cool part. He transformed it into a symbol. His company was developing tech to personalize digital content. He held up the portfolio and said, imagine this as a digital platform. With our technology, it shows you only the information that matters to you personally.
Okay, so he turned something ordinary into a representation of his whole business, something concrete for the investors to grab onto.
Exactly. And guess what? They got it. They invested millions. That maroon portfolio, which started as just a regular object, became the symbol of the company's vision.
I love that. It shows that thinking outside the box and making those abstract ideas concrete can have a real impact. So, okay, we've got their attention with something unexpected, and we've made it clear with concrete examples. But how do we make sure they actually believe what we're saying?
You're talking credibility, right?
Yeah, because you can have the most amazing story in the world, but if it doesn't sound believable, people are going to tune out.
Yeah.
So how do we build that credibility?
Well, it can come from external sources, like mentioning an expert or a study, but it can also come from the idea itself. One way to do that is through testable credentials.
Testable credentials. Break that down for me.
It's basically saying, don't just take our word for it, try it yourself. The classic example is the Wendy's Where's the Beef campaign. They didn't just say their burgers were bigger, they showed it. Those juicy patties compared to their competitors' tiny burgers.
Oh, yeah. It was like, boom, here's the proof. You couldn't argue with it.
Right. Speaking of proof, sometimes using an anti-authority can be even more powerful than relying on a traditional expert.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
Well, Think about those powerful anti-smoking ads with Pam Laughlin. She wasn't a doctor, but she was a real smoker suffering from emphysema. And they showed her struggling to breathe, going through all those painful
Oh,
treatments.
I remember those. It was so raw and honest.
Exactly. She wasn't preaching. She was speaking from her own experience, which made it so much more credible and impactful. But even with testable credentials, you gotta be careful.
Wait, why? What do you mean?
Well, seeing is believing, right? But what we see can sometimes be misleading. Like, remember that rumor that Snapple supported the KKK? People saw some symbols on their bottles and jumped to conclusions.
Oh, yeah, and it turned out to be a complete misunderstanding, right?
Totally. The symbols actually had nothing to do with hate groups. It just goes to show that even when you have evidence right in front of you, you can still draw the wrong conclusions.
So it's not enough to just show. You have to guide the interpretation.
Uh,
Okay, so we've talked about using external sources, testable credentials, and being mindful of misinterpretations. What else can we do to make our ideas credible?
well, think about statistics. Big numbers can be overwhelming. Instead of throwing a ton of data at people, we can use what's called the human scale principle.
Human scale principle. That's new to me. What is that?
It's about making statistics relatable by connecting them to everyday experiences. Instead of saying millions of children die each year from preventable diseases, you could say, imagine a classroom full of children gone because they didn't have access to basic health care.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a powerful shift. It makes it real tangible.
Right. And it helps people grasp the magnitude of the problem on a more emotional level. It's not just a number, it's a human tragedy. Stephen Covey, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, does this too. He talks about teamwork and he uses a soccer analogy. Imagine two players deciding to play against everyone else trying to score goals on their own team.
Wait, what? That makes no sense. Why would anyone do that?
Exactly. It highlights the absurdity of a lack of cooperation. Then he throws in the statistic. 80% of companies say teamwork is crucial, but only 10% of employees feel their company works as a team.
Okay, so he makes you laugh with a ridiculous soccer scenario, and then bam,
Yeah.
he hits you with the stats.
Exactly. You remember it because it's funny and it makes you think. That's the human scale principle in action. He translated a complex concept into a simple, relatable story.
So it's all about those connections, right? Bringing information down to a level we can all understand. It's not just about stating facts. It's about making them resonate.
You got it. Whether it's through vivid imagery, relatable examples, or emotionally resonant stories, it's about making those connections.
Speaking of stories, have you ever heard the saying, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere? It's like this ultimate test of credibility. If you can achieve something really difficult, it shows you can handle anything.
Ah, you're talking about the Sinatra test. It's a powerful way to establish credibility, especially when you're presenting something that seems impossible. You need that one success story that proves your idea can work, even in the toughest circumstances.
Okay, I'm with you. Like, if a company can deliver packages through the busiest city in the world, then they can probably handle my order without a problem.
That's it. The Sinatra test shows you can handle the extremes. It builds trust. Speaking of which, have you heard of Ronner Textile?
No, tell me about it.
They're a textile manufacturer, and they did something pretty amazing. They created a manufacturing process that doesn't use any toxic chemicals.
Wait, really? Isn't the textile industry known for being, well, not so eco-friendly?
You would think, right? But they did it. They worked with these sustainability experts and completely changed their process.
That's impressive. But how did they convince people it was possible?
They showed, not just told. It was their own Sinatra test. The water coming out of their factory was so clean that inspectors thought their equipment was broken. And the fabric scraps. They used to be hazardous waste, but now they were safe enough to be turned into felt for insulation or even eaten.
Whoa, seriously, they turned trash into treasure. Talk about walking the walk.
Right. And get this, their manufacturing costs actually went down by 20%.
No way. So it's actually more efficient and better for the environment.
You got it. It's a win-win. And it goes back to credibility. They didn't just talk about their eco-friendly vision, they made it a reality.
They put their money where their mouth is. Their actions speak louder than words. Okay, so we've talked about how to make ideas believable. But let's be real, sometimes logic and evidence just don't cut it. We're emotional beings, right?
Absolutely. And that's why tapping into emotions is so important.
But doesn't that feel kind of manipulative, like playing with people's feelings?
It's not about manipulation, it's about connecting with what matters to people. It's about understanding their values, their aspirations, their fears, and framing your message in a way that speaks to those emotions.
Okay, so it's not about tricking people, it's about finding that emotional core that resonates. So how do you do that authentically?
Well, look at the Don't Mess with Texas anti-littering campaign. They didn't just say littering is bad, they tapped into Texan pride.
Oh yeah, I remember those ads with all the celebrities. But how is that emotional?
They made it personal. They said that littering was an insult to Texas itself. It went against Texan
It
values.
was like, you wouldn't want to be that guy who disrespects Texas, would you?
You got it. And it worked. Littering in Texas actually went down significantly. That shows you the power of emotional connection. Even something like littering can become a matter of personal pride when you frame it the right way.
So even small actions can be tied to bigger emotions.
Exactly. It's not just about big campaigns either. Even everyday things can be framed in a way that appeals to our emotions and needs.
Okay, like what?
Well, there's this great story about this guy, Russell Lee, who was an army mess hall manager in Iraq.
Okay, how does that connect to emotions? I'm
Yeah.
intrigued.
He was in charge of this chow hall, and he understood that his job was more than just serving food. It was about boosting morale, you know? He
Wow.
wanted to create a nice space for the soldiers who were dealing with so much stress.
So he was thinking about their well-being, their mental health.
Yeah, he transformed the chow hall into a really nice space with decorations and even servers in chef hats. They had themed meals, live music, the whole 9 yards.
So he turned mealtime into an experience.
Exactly. And the food was incredible too. Soldiers would come from miles around just to eat at his chow hall. It became famous for its quality and atmosphere.
That's amazing. So he was taking care of their basic needs, but also making them feel valued and appreciated.
Exactly. He was fulfilling those higher level needs, you know? He created a sense of community in a place that was really stressful.
It's like he was saying, hey, I see you, I care about you, and I want to make your day a little bit better. That's powerful. So we've talked about how stories can tap into emotions, but what makes a story really stick? What kind of stories do people remember?
You know, stories are like flight simulators for our brains. They allow us to experience situations and learn from them without any real world consequences.
It's a cool way to think about it.
And there are three main types of stories that tend to stick with people. The first is challenge plots, which are about overcoming obstacles. Think about the classic underdog story, like David and Goliath.
Oh, yeah, I love a good underdog story.
A perfect example of a challenge plot is the story of Jared from Subway. He lost a ton of weight by eating Subway
Oh,
sandwiches.
yeah, I remember him. It was inspiring to see his transformation.
Exactly. It gave people hope, you know, it showed that change was possible. And challenge plots don't have to be about epic battles, they can be about everyday struggles, like learning a new skill.
So it's about that journey, the struggle, and ultimately the triumph.
Right. And then there are connection plots. These stories are all about building relationships and finding common ground.
So like Romeo and Juliet, or maybe even like The Notebook.
Exactly. They tap into our need for connection. They remind us that we're not alone, that we all share similar hopes and dreams. And then we have creativity plots.
Okay, what are those about?
They're about innovation, problem solving, thinking outside the box. Think of the Apollo 13 mission where engineers had to figure out how to fix the spacecraft using only the resources they had on board.
That's a great example. It's about using creativity to overcome a seemingly impossible challenge.
Exactly. And these stories are super relevant today because innovation is so important. They inspire us to find new and better ways of doing things. I actually have a great example of a creativity plot. Have you heard of Stephen Denning?
The name rings a bell, but refresh my memory.
Well, he was this World Bank executive, and he was trying to convince his colleagues about the importance of knowledge management.
Knowledge management sounds a little, dry.
It can be. He knew he couldn't just lecture them about databases, so he told a story.
Ooh, a story. Okay, I'm all ears.
It was about a World Bank project in Zambia where the team developed a new approach to agricultural development. They documented everything, created training materials, and shared their insights with other teams.
So they were sharing their knowledge instead of hoarding it. Smart.
Right. And Denning's story worked. His colleagues, who weren't initially interested in knowledge management, suddenly saw its value.
So he took a dry topic and made it come alive with a compelling story.
That's the power of storytelling. It can make even the most complex ideas relatable and engaging.
And memorable. We're much more likely to remember a story than a list of facts and figures.
Exactly. Stories stick with us. They make us think, feel, and act.
And they help us connect with each other on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's like stories are the universal language of humanity. It's like we're wired for stories. They get us on so many levels, emotionally, intellectually. I mean, think about how a good story can give you chills.
It's true. Like you get transported to another world.
Mhm.
But how do we know which stories are going to work?
Mm.
I mean, there are so many out there. What makes some stick and others just fade away?
I think a lot of it comes down to understanding what you're trying to achieve with your story. Do you want to inspire action, build empathy, spark creative thinking? Each type of plot,
Hmm.
challenge, connection, creativity, they each have their own strengths.
Oh, interesting. So it's like having different tools in your storytelling toolbox.
Exactly. Say you're a leader trying to motivate your team to reach a really tough goal. A challenge plot can be super effective there. Tell a story about how your company faced a similar obstacle and overcame it.
Like you're giving them a roadmap, showing them it's possible.
Exactly. Or if you want to create a more collaborative environment, a connection plot can be really powerful. Tell a story about different departments coming together to achieve a shared goal.
So they see each other as allies, working together.
Right. And if you're trying to encourage creative problem solving, a creativity plot is your go-to. Tell a story about a time when someone challenged the status quo and it led to a breakthrough.
So, like, giving people permission to think outside the box,
Hmm.
I like it. But you don't have to be a professional storyteller to use these plots, right?
Absolutely not. Just be aware of the stories you come across in your life. The ones that grab you, that make you think. Those are the ones worth sharing.
So be a student of stickiness.
Hmm.
Figure out what makes those stories so compelling and apply those lessons to your own communication.
That's it. It's like reverse engineering a recipe. You taste something amazing, you're like, okay, what's in this? And then you try to recreate it.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've been talking about all these principles, but there's this one thing that always gets me. It's like, I can't step outside of my own head and see things from someone else's perspective.
You're talking about the curse of knowledge.
Yes. It's so frustrating. It's like, I think I'm being clear, but then I realize the other person is totally lost.
Mm. It happens to all of us, especially when we're experts in something. We forget what it's like to not know that thing.
Like trying to teach someone to drive stick shift when you've been driving manual your whole life. You forget how tricky that clutch can be.
I know, right? But the good news is those 6 principles of stickiness we've been talking about, they can actually help us overcome the curse of knowledge.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, they act as a bridge between our knowledge and the listener's understanding. Simplicity helps us cut through jargon. Unexpectedness grabs attention. Concreteness makes things real. Credibility builds trust. Emotion makes the message resonate. And stories bring it all together.
It's like having this checklist to make sure our ideas actually land. Okay, so those principles are our secret weapons against confusing communication. I like it. But let's get practical. How can we use this stuff in different areas of our lives?
Well, let's start with business. One mistake I see companies make is relying on these abstract mission statements and corporate jargon that nobody understands. Instead, translate those goals into concrete actions and relatable examples.
Show, don't tell.
Right, right. Instead of saying, we're the leading provider of innovative solutions, tell a story about how your company helped a specific customer solve a real problem. And stories are also great for building a company culture. Instead of just listing values on a website, share stories about employees who embody those values.
Make those values come alive. And I bet stories are super powerful for marketing too.
You bet. Don't just list features. Tell stories about how your product improves people's lives, connect with their emotions, their aspirations.
Well, instead of saying, our software is the fastest, you could say something like, imagine having more free time to spend with your family. Our software can help you do that.
Now you're talking. You've tapped into what really matters to people, their time, their relationships. Okay, so that's business. What about education?
Yeah, education. Making ideas stick is crucial in the classroom. How can teachers use this stuff?
Well, teachers can start by using the power of surprise. Start a lesson with a weird fact or a question that challenges their assumptions.
So instead of saying, gravity makes things fall, you could say, did you know a feather and a bowling ball would fall at the same speed in a vacuum?
Exactly. It gets them thinking. And concreteness is key too. Don't just talk about theories, make them tangible. Use real-world examples, hands-on activities, visuals.
It's like, get them involved. The more senses you engage, the better.
Absolutely. And of course, stories. Use stories to bring historical figures to life, to explain scientific concepts, to explore literary themes.
Stories make learning fun. They're like the sprinkles on a cupcake.
Exactly. Okay, what about communicating about social issues? That can be tough.
Yeah, how can we make those messages stick and inspire people to take action?
Well, one thing we can do is use the human scale principle to make those big statistics more relatable.
So instead of overwhelming people with numbers, you connect them to real people's lives.
Exactly. Instead of saying millions lack clean water, you could say, imagine a mother having to walk miles every day to get water for her family.
That's much more powerful. It puts a human face on the problem.
And don't forget the power of stories. Share stories about people who are affected by the issue. Let those stories inspire empathy and action.
Show people that change is possible, that we can make a difference. Okay, so we've talked about business, education, and social issues. What about our personal lives? How can we use these principles in our everyday interaction?
Oh, there are so many opportunities. Whether you're trying to get your family to try a new recipe or convince your friends to support a cause you care about.
These principles can help us communicate better in all areas of our lives.
Right. So let's make an effort to be more mindful of how we communicate. Let's choose our words carefully, craft compelling stories, and remember those 6 principles.
Let's make our ideas stick, not just for us, but to make a difference in the world.
It's like we're all broadcasters in a way, competing for attention.
And the cool thing is, we don't need a fancy studio or millions of followers to be heard. We just need to understand the principles and be passionate about what we're saying.
Exactly. Anyone can learn to do this.
I love that. So cheers to sticky ideas, to those sparks of insight that illuminate our minds and inspire us to action.
Cheers to those unforgettable messages that shape our understanding and drive positive change.
And cheers to all of you for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope you enjoyed the ride and that you'll keep exploring the fascinating world of sticky ideas.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep sharing those brilliant ideas.
And remember, the best way to learn is to teach. So share what you've learned with someone else. Spread the stickiness.
We'll see you on the next deep dive. Happy sticking.
You know, it's kind of like we're all telling stories all the time, even if we don't realize it. And the more we understand about what makes a good story, the better we can share our experiences and our ideas.
I like that. It's not just about remembering facts. It's about making a connection.
Yeah.
Getting people to think and maybe even see things a little differently.
Exactly. It's about those aha moments that can change minds and inspire action.
Okay, so we've talked about the 6 principles: simplicity, unexpectedness, concreteness, credibility, emotions, and stories. And we've seen how they work in business, education, activism. But how do we actually become masters of stickiness?
Well, first, we need to be aware. Start paying attention to the ideas that really grab you, the stories that stay with you. Ask yourself, why do these stick?
So, be a stickiness detective. What makes those ideas so compelling?
Exactly. Break it down. Is it the surprise, the vivid details, the emotions? The more you analyze those sticky ideas, the more you'll start to see the patterns.
It's like learning a new language. At first, it's just a jumble of words, but then you start to understand the grammar and you can form your own sentences.
That's a great way to put it. And just like learning a language, it takes practice. Try using those 6 principles in your everyday conversations. See what works.
So play around with it. It's not about following a formula. It's about finding your own voice.
Right. And remember, the most important ingredient is passion. If you don't care about what you're saying, no one else will.
Enthusiasm is contagious, right? You can tell when someone is really into what they're talking about.
Totally. Passion gives those ideas that extra spark. But what about when you get stuck? What if you have a great idea, but you just can't seem to make it stick?
Yeah, that happens to me all the time. What do you do then?
Sometimes you just need to step away from it for a bit. Go for a walk, listen to music, clear your head.
It's like when you're working on a puzzle and you get stuck. You
Yeah.
take a break, and then suddenly the answer comes to you.
That's it. Our brains need time to process and make connections. Another thing that can help is talking to someone about your idea.
Oh, yeah. Bouncing ideas off someone else can be so helpful.
Definitely. Sometimes just explaining it out loud helps you see it more clearly, and the other person might ask a question that unlocks the whole thing.
It's like they hold up a mirror to your thinking.
Mm.
And sometimes it's not pretty, but it helps you see where you need to make adjustments.
Exactly. Feedback is so important. And another thing that can help is exposing yourself to new ideas. Read books, listen to podcasts, have conversations with people who have different perspectives.
Keep learning and growing, right?
Exactly. The more you learn, the more you have to draw from when you're trying to make your own ideas stick.
I'm really feeling inspired by all of this.
Mm.
It's so much about being curious, open-minded, and willing to experiment.
That's what it's all about. It's a journey, and the more we embrace that journey, the better we'll become at sharing our ideas and making a positive impact.
It's like we're all artists in a way, trying to create something beautiful and meaningful.
I love that analogy. So let's keep exploring, keep creating, and keep making those ideas stick.
All right, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered so much ground: the science of stickiness, the art of storytelling, the power of passion.
It's been awesome exploring these ideas with you.
Likewise. And to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive and that you'll take these principles and make them your own.
The world needs your ideas, so go out there and make those ideas stick.
Until next time, happy sticking.